Michelle Elliott had a vision earlier in the week that was really, really powerful, and it just fits so well with what the message is this morning, along with a dream that her husband had as well. So let's just take a moment and listen to what that vision was.
Hi there, I just wanted to come on real quickly and share some things that the Lord's been showing me overnight about the situation with the coronavirus that's currently sweeping across the world, and with particular regard to the United Kingdom. So I just want to go ahead and share what the Lord showed me in the night last night. He reminded me of a programme that I'd been watching recently, a historical fictional programme, and it was about the first settlers in the United States who had all been given plots of farmland that they were to cultivate and grow crops on, and how the farmers started to notice that there were locusts appearing on their land and destroying some of their crops, and increasingly these locusts were coming in larger amounts. And they'd heard from other farmers in other parts of America that there's actually a plague of locusts that were heading their way, that they'd already caused a huge amount of devastation of ruining crops and people's livelihoods. And so all the farmers in that region came together and started to strategise about how they could prevent their crops from being decimated by this plague of locusts. And they came up with the strategy of setting pots of burning material so that they could effectively create smoke. And their theory was that if they created like a blanket of smoke over the whole area, that the locusts would be confused, that they wouldn't know where to land, and it would pass them over. Now, some people weren't sure that if this strategy would work. There were people that weren't sure if they wanted to join in with this, but they all came together, huge areas over hundreds of farms, and they all agreed at the same time and the same day, when they knew this plague was about to head their way, that they would set these pots of burning material, and that they would all stand there and fan this smoke to create this huge smoke cloud that would hover above their farms. And they all came together at the same time, and they started fanning this smoke. They created what they had hoped, which was this huge sort of blanket of smoke. And sure enough, as the plague of locusts came over, they were confused. They didn't know where they were. They couldn't see where to land. Obviously, they couldn't smell the crops, or however they detect where they are, and it passed them over. Their crops were on the whole saved. There were some casualties along the way where the locusts had started to come. And the Lord just showed me in really simple terms that this is similar to what's happening with this coronavirus, in the fact that we know that this virus has caused absolute devastation across the world, and many thousands of precious lives have been lost and are being affected every day. Now, if we listen to some of the news reports, we know that the situation in the United Kingdom isn't that great at the moment, and that they are expecting it to become increasingly worse. And the Lord just showed me, this smoke that is collectively going up is our prayers. It's the prayers of the saints. It's the prayers of his people. And as we come together in our nation, in the different regions, in our different congregations, and we come together at the same time, and we create this almost spiritual smoke, if you like, to protect our land, to protect our nation. And what those prayers do is, not only do they touch the heart of God, the compassionate, merciful and gracious God, but they send up confusion into the spiritual realm, so that when the enemy comes in with this virus, he's completely confused. The spiritual atmosphere is so changed by the prayers of the saints that he has no idea where he is. He can't see where to land. And so you know what's going to happen? He's going to pass over like those plagues passed over. And the Lord just showed me this is a collective thing. Like, if you just had one pot burning here, it's not going to make any difference. But you have a collective, hundreds, thousands of pots of people sending up those prayers to the Lord, beseeching him to step in, to move, cursing this virus that has come upon the world. He not only listens, but it creates that blanket of protection over our nation. The other thing is, I was sharing this with my husband this morning and just saying, look, this is what the Lord was speaking to me about in the night. And he'd actually said, you know what, I had a dream in the night. And he went ahead and told me about that. and that was of a causeway, and either side of the causeway were two huge towns or cities, and he was looking out over these towns and cities, and a man approached him and just simply said to him, "What, you mean to tell me that this town on the right was completely wiped out by this coronavirus, but this town on the left over here was completely saved, that no one died, that everyone was okay?" And that was his dream. And I think it's just really obvious, you know, the prayers of the saints are so important at this time. The prayers of every believer are so important at this time. It is life and death for some people. And in the night, the Lord was beginning to reveal more and more things to me. And he reminded me of the passage in Genesis 18, where Abraham approaches God on behalf of Sodom. Now, God had plans to destroy Sodom because it was just such a depraved, awful, horrific place. And now, obviously, I'm not paralleling this with the virus, because we know 100% that this is not from the Lord. This is complete enemy tactics. The Lord hasn't sent it. It's got nothing to do with it. But this is the enemy coming in to try and kill, steal and destroy. But we know that Jesus has come that we may have life, and life in all its fullness. So the point of the story of Abraham was that he actually went before God and approached him with boldness and said to God, "God, if there are 50 righteous people in Sodom, will you spare those 50 righteous people? You can't destroy the righteous with the unrighteous, because that's not who you are." And God, you know, God did even more than Abraham asked. He said, "You know what, Abraham, if there are 50 righteous people in Sodom, not only will I save the 50 righteous, I will save the whole of Sodom on behalf of those 50 righteous people." And we know that Abraham sort of negotiated God down to the point where he got to 10 right. If there were 10 righteous people in Sodom, God agreed he would save the whole town of Sodom, the whole area of Sodom, because of those 10 righteous people. Now, we know that it didn't end well for Sodom, because there were unfortunately no righteous people that could be found. But the point of that story is, what I believe the Lord was revealing is, we as his children have the same position as Abraham had, in that we can approach God's throne because of Jesus, because of what he's done for us, and because of our faith in him. And we can ask God to intervene in this situation, to expedite his plans for our exit strategy. We know that this can't go on forever, and we know that God has an end point where he's going to say enough's enough and he's going to rush in. But I believe as we approach his throne with boldness, as Abraham did, and we cry out for mercy, and we cry out for forgiveness on behalf of our nation, and we also cry out for God just to intervene, God, bring an end to this, save lives, bring an end to what's going on, that those prayers touch his heart and can actually move forward his plans for his plans of salvation, and his plans to bring this whole horrible situation to an end. We see that from what he was willing to do for Abraham over Sodom. He was willing to change his plans completely to save the whole town, because one man stood up and said, "But God, you are the righteous God, and you will not destroy the righteous with the unrighteous." And God said, "Actually, I will save them all if they're the righteous people can be found." So I believe that as we approach God's throne via Jesus, we can ask him to expedite his plans, intervene. Come, Lord Jesus, come save us out of this situation. Glorify your name in this situation. So it's the prayers of the saints collectively going up across the whole of the United Kingdom. And it's us approaching God's throne and asking him, beseeching him to move quickly. And I believe wholeheartedly that we can see this situation in the United Kingdom completely turned around, that we can be that town that my husband saw in that dream, the town that was untouched, or the nation that was relatively untouched, as opposed to the neighbouring nations who have unfortunately seen so much devastation. And this is coming from a place of humility. This is not a pride thing about we can make this happen, we can't do anything. But if we approach God's throne with boldness, we come with humble hearts, just asking for forgiveness and asking God to intervene, we can turn the tide spiritually on what is going on in this nation. I believe that 100%, and I know that there are hundreds of thousands of people who believe that as well. So it's the collective prayer, and it's coming before God with a humble heart, asking for forgiveness on behalf of our nation, and asking him to intervene and just to expedite his plans for the release of this situation over this nation.
God is speaking so clearly at this time and encouraging us not just us here, but the church to pray. And I think that vision really encapsulates the power of prayer and the prayer of the saints, but also how it stops the enemy from landing and doing what he wants to do in our nation. And as Michelle said, we appreciate there is some damage or some effects, but as the prayers of the saints go up, it's going to limit massively the effect of this on the nation.